Have you ever wondered why certain people appear in your life at the exact moment you feel lost, overwhelmed, or quietly breaking inside? Maybe it was a stranger whose kindness softened a day that felt unbearable. Maybe it was someone who hurt you so deeply that you had no choice but to grow, or someone who stayed only long enough to show you a truth you had been afraid to face. Picture this. You are sitting in your room late at night. The world around you is quiet, but inside, memories move like shadows. Faces you miss, faces you avoid, conversations that ended too soon, connections that arrived suddenly and disappeared without explanation. You tell yourself it was random, coincidence, accident. Yet something in your chest whispers that there was meaning woven through it all. Tonight, you are going to explore a deeper view, a view the Buddha taught when he spoke about conditions, causes, and the mysterious way lives touch one another. A view that says every encounter is part of a larger unfolding, a gentle movement of karma and connection shaping who you become. This is not a story of destiny. It is a story of awakening, a story of learning to see people not as accidents, but as mirrors, teachers, companions on the path. Some come to open your heart, some come to test its strength, some come to guide you back to yourself when you have drifted too far away. Stay with this soft breath. Let the tension melt just a little. Let the mind settle like dust returning to the earth. Tonight you will discover why certain people enter your life, why some stay, why some must leave, and how each one can be a stepping stone toward clarity, compassion, and freedom. If the stories and teachings here nourish your heart, you are welcome to follow this channel so you can rest in this kind of gentle learning whenever you need it. The first teaching, the meeting of conditions. Have you ever looked back at a relationship and realized it changed the trajectory of your entire life? Someone appeared, not with fanfare, not with obvious importance, but with a quiet presence that shifted something deep inside you. Maybe they awakened hope when you had forgotten it. Maybe they challenged you in ways that felt uncomfortable but necessary. Maybe they reflected a wound you had been avoiding for years. In Buddhist understanding, none of these encounters are accidental. They arise through the meeting of conditions. Just as a lotus blooms only when sun, mud, rain, and time come together in harmony, the Buddha taught that everything is shaped by causes and conditions. Nothing appears out of nowhere. Nothing unfolds in isolation. Every meeting between people is part of a larger tapestry of karma, intention, history, and inner readiness. When two lives touch, it is never as simple as coincidence. It is the ripening of many seeds planted long before either person recognizes what is happening. This way of seeing transforms the chaos of human connection into something meaningful, spacious, and full of possibility. Think about the paths you have walked, the people who taught you patience, the ones who pushed you toward strength, the ones who broke you open so compassion could grow in the empty spaces. Some connections lasted a lifetime, others lasted a few conversations. Yet each left an imprint, each shaped the subtle architecture of your mind and heart. According to Buddhist teaching, these encounters illuminate your path precisely when you are ready to learn what they bring, even if the lessons arrive wrapped in confusion or pain. Let me tell you about Elena. She was someone who believed strongly in logic and control. She organized her days into meticulous schedules. Every aspect of her life was planned, predictable, and tightly held together. Yet despite her efforts, a quiet emptiness followed her everywhere. It showed up between meetings, in the silence after dinner, in the hollow feeling she carried home from achievements that should have made her proud. She kept telling herself she just needed to work harder, plan better, fill her time more efficiently. But deeper truth was waiting for the right conditions to reveal itself. One afternoon, while standing in line at a grocery store, she met a man named Daniel. The encounter was brief. He accidentally dropped a bag of apples at her feet. She helped him pick them up. They exchanged a small laugh. He said something simple about how strange it was that life never followed our plans. She nodded politely. She thought it was just small talk. Yet something in his tone stayed with her for days. His words carried a kind of softness she had not allowed herself to feel. A week later, she crossed paths with him again at a quiet tea shop near her office. She was surprised. He was surprised. They talked for a short while, only about ordinary things, but the conversation left her strangely calm. It was as if she had been holding her breath for years and had finally exhaled without noticing. She expected nothing to come from these encounters. Yet life was arranging conditions she did not understand. Daniel carried a gentleness born from surviving his own storms. Years earlier, he had lost someone he loved deeply. In the hollow grief that followed, he had turned to meditation, because it was the only thing that could hold his breaking heart without rushing him through pain. Over time, he learned to breathe again. He learned to sit with sorrow without drowning in it. He learned that nothing in life is accidental, not even the moments that hurt the most. He did not share all of this with Elena in the beginning, but she sensed something steady in him, something she needed but did not know how to cultivate alone. One evening, after a particularly difficult day at work, she found herself standing outside the same tea shop. She did not intend to go in. She simply needed a moment of quiet. Through the window, she saw him sitting with a book. Without thinking, she walked inside and sat across from him. For the first time in a long time, she let her guard down. She spoke softly about the exhaustion she carried, the pressure she placed on herself, the fear that she was living a life built entirely from expectation rather than truth. Daniel listened without trying to fix anything. After a long pause, he said that suffering often flowers when we cling too tightly to control. He told her how meditation had taught him that life is not something to dominate, but something to meet with gentle, open hands. He explained that the Buddha described this as the dance of causes and conditions. When we soften our grip, we can finally see the path unfolding beneath our feet. His words landed in her heart like warm rain on dry soil. In the weeks that followed, their conversations deepened. They did not talk about fate or destiny. They talked about awareness, intention, and the quiet shifts that happen when you learn to listen inwardly. Slowly, she began to notice her own patterns, the tightness in her chest she had ignored for years, the constant inner voice telling her she was never doing enough, the fear that stillness would reveal truths she felt unprepared to face. Yet each time these fears rose, she remembered his gentle reminder that nothing appears without cause, and nothing heals without being seen. What she did not realize at first was that she had entered a sacred moment of ripening. Her life had reached a point where the right teaching, delivered through the right person, could finally take root. Daniel was not her savior. He was simply a condition, a mirror, a catalyst, a person whose presence illuminated something already waiting inside her. When she eventually began studying meditation more seriously, she understood why the Buddha emphasized that the teacher appears when the student is ready. Not because the teacher changes everything, but because readiness allows wisdom to be recognized, where before it was invisible. One evening, as they walked home under soft streetlights, she asked him if he believed they were meant to meet. He smiled and said he did not believe in meant to, but he believed deeply in conditions. He explained that their meeting was like rain falling on a field. Rain does not choose which seeds to nourish. It simply arrives. Whether something grows depends on what has already been planted. Her heart softened as she listened. She realized she had spent her whole life trying to force growth through effort alone. Now she saw that growth also comes from allowing, receiving, and trusting the slow unfolding of life. Soon after, Daniel moved to another city for work. Their connection shifted naturally into distance. There was no dramatic farewell, simply gratitude, honesty, and a quiet understanding that their paths had intersected exactly as long as they needed to. For a moment, this made Elena sad. Yet as she reflected, she saw the deeper truth. His role in her life was never meant to be permanence. It was to awaken a part of her that had been asleep. Once awakened, it was hers to nurture. After he left, she began each morning with 5 minutes of stillness. Sitting quietly, feeling her breath rise and fall, she whispered inwardly, "May I meet each moment with gentle awareness." She practiced seeing the conditions that created her stress, rather than blaming herself for feeling overwhelmed. She recognized how her childhood shaped her need for control. She saw how work expectations fueled the belief that her worth depended on performance. She learned to greet these patterns with compassion rather than judgment. Slowly, she noticed her days becoming lighter. Not because responsibilities changed, but because her relationship with them softened. This is the heart of the first teaching. People come into your life not to complete you or save you, but to activate the next stage of your becoming. Their presence reflects your readiness. Their departure reflects completion of a cycle. When conditions shift, relationships shift. When understanding deepens, attachments loosen. None of this is random. None of this is wrong. It is simply the unfolding of causes meeting conditions. Let us turn this teaching into practice now. Sit comfortably. Let your shoulders drop. Allow your breath to slow without forcing it. Bring to mind someone who entered your life and changed you in some meaningful way. Notice how your body responds as you remember them. Warmth perhaps, grief perhaps, gratitude perhaps. Let it all be here. Whisper inwardly, "I see the conditions that brought this person into my life." Then, breathe gently. Whisper, "I release the story of accident." Then, breathe again. Whisper, "I honor what this connection awakened in me." Rest with this awareness for a few slow breaths. Feel the spaciousness that opens when you see people not as random occurrences, but as teachers shaped by conditions. When you return to your day, carry this subtle understanding with you. Each encounter, even the painful ones, can be held with curiosity instead of confusion, gratitude instead of resentment, openness instead of fear. This is how awakening begins, through seeing clearly, through honoring the quiet choreography of conditions guiding your path, through recognizing that no one enters your life without offering you something essential for your journey. You do not need to force meaning. You only need to listen with a gentle heart. The second teaching, the mirror of karma. Have you ever met someone whose presence stirred something in you instantly, long before you understood why? Perhaps they awakened tenderness you had forgotten. Perhaps they triggered anger you thought you had outgrown. Perhaps they made you feel seen in a way that frightened you. In Buddhism, these reactions are not mysteries, they are mirrors. The Buddha taught that every encounter reveals karma, not as punishment or reward, but as the unfolding of emotional patterns seeking to be understood and released. People rise in your life like reflections on still water, showing you the shape of your own mind. Karma is often misunderstood as destiny, as if everything is predetermined and unchangeable. But in truth, karma simply means action, and the traces actions leave in the heart. Every experience you live through plants a seed. Some seeds remain dormant for years, others sprout quickly, yet all of them wait for the right conditions to ripen. When someone enters your life and evokes a strong reaction, pleasant or painful, it is often a sign that a buried seed has awakened. Let me share the story of Marcus, a man who carried anger without knowing its roots. On the surface, he was successful, composed, admired for his intelligence and determination. Yet beneath this, a quiet storm lived inside him. Certain people could trigger that storm instantly. Someone speaking in a condescending tone, someone interrupting him mid-sentence, someone questioning his competence. The reactions came swiftly, almost reflexively. His chest tightened, his jaw clenched, his thoughts accelerated into a familiar rush of defensiveness. He often regretted his words later, but in the moment the reaction felt unavoidable, as if someone else had taken control of his voice. Marcus believed these reactions were caused by the people around him. He said often that some people just knew how to push his buttons. What he did not realize was that the Buddha had already explained why this happens. No one can push a button that does not already exist in your heart. Those who trigger you are mirrors reflecting old wounds. Those who soothe you are mirrors reflecting forgotten strengths. Those who confuse you are mirrors reflecting parts of yourself still waiting to be understood. One morning, after a heated argument with a colleague, Marcus sat in his car feeling exhausted. He did not understand why such small exchanges could drain him so deeply. As he sat there, hands on the steering wheel, breath ragged, a question arose in him uninvited. What exactly am I fighting? It was the first moment of true curiosity he had ever directed toward his anger. That afternoon, he walked into a small meditation group near his office. He had seen the sign for years, but never stepped inside. The teacher was a gentle woman with grey hair and a quiet presence that felt like warm shade on a hot day. When he shared that anger controlled him, she nodded with compassion. Then she said something that unsettled him and relieved him at the same time. The people who trigger you are not causing your suffering, they are revealing it. She explained that in Buddhist psychology, unresolved emotional patterns persist until they are met with mindfulness and compassion. Avoiding difficult people offers temporary relief, but no transformation. Meeting them with awareness reveals the karmic seeds that still need tending. Marcus listened quietly. He felt both exposed and hopeful, as if someone had finally shone a light on a landscape he had been wandering in darkness. She invited him to try a simple practice. The next time anger arose, instead of reacting, he was to ask himself 3 questions. What am I feeling in my body right now? What memory does this sensation resemble? What belief is being triggered? These questions were not meant to analyze the other person. They were meant to illuminate his own patterns. 2 days later, he had the opportunity to practice. His colleague made a dismissive remark during a meeting. The familiar heat surged in Marcus' chest. His mind's shouts rose instantly. He felt the old impulse to fire back, to defend himself sharply. But he remembered the 3 questions. What am I feeling in my body right now? Tightness in his chest, a sharp pressure in his throat. What memory does this sensation resemble? Suddenly, he remembered being a child, standing in his living room while his father criticized him for failing a math test. The same constriction, the same helplessness. What belief is being triggered? The belief that he was not good enough, that he must defend himself to prove his worth. His colleague's remark had not created these feelings, it had simply uncovered them. The anger was an echo, not a new wound. Marcus felt his breath deepen. For the first time in years, he did not respond with defensiveness. He simply said, "Thank you for the feedback. I will consider it." It surprised him how steady his voice sounded. The colleague looked momentarily confused, but the conversation moved forward smoothly. When Marcus left the meeting, he felt something shift inside him. It was not victory. It was not suppression. It was clarity. He realized that seeing his patterns did not make him weak. It made him free. The Buddha described this as the moment of clear seeing, when the heart understands its own architecture. Weeks passed. Marcus continued practicing. Each emotional trigger became an opportunity to understand another layer of his conditioning. He learned that behind his anger lived fear of inadequacy. Behind the fear lived grief from never feeling accepted as a child. Behind the grief lived a longing for gentleness he had never learned to offer himself. Little by little, the storm inside him softened. Then, something unexpected happened. A new colleague named Aaron joined the team. Aaron was warm, slow to judge, quick to listen. He offered generosity where others offered competition. Marcus found himself relaxing around him. He felt seen without being evaluated. One afternoon over coffee, Aaron shared that he had once struggled with anxiety and had healed through meditation. His openness moved Marcus in a way he could not explain. That evening, Marcus reflected on why this new presence felt so comforting. He realized that just as some people mirror your wounds, others mirror your inner healing. Every person who appears in your life, whether soothing or triggering, participates in the unfolding of your karma. They bring forward the parts of you that are ready to be understood, softened, or strengthened. One day, Marcus asked his meditation teacher how he could know whether a person was meant to stay in his life or simply pass through. She smiled and said, "No one stays forever. The question is not who remains, but who helps you awaken. Some do so through kindness, others through difficulty. Both are teachers." This answer surprised him. It made him see relationships without clinging. He learned to appreciate people for the lessons they brought, not for how long they stayed. He could finally understand something profound. Encounters that triggered him were not curses. Encounters that soothed him were not miracles. They were simply reflections of the evolving landscape of his heart. Now let us turn this into practice. Sit comfortably. Allow the breath to move gently through the body. Bring to mind someone who triggers you. Not the most painful person, but someone who stirs irritation or defensiveness. Feel the sensations in your body as you picture them. Warmth, tightness, pressure, pulsing. Do not judge. Simply notice. Whisper inwardly, "I see what is being revealed." Then ask, what old memory echoes in this reaction? Wait for the answer to arise naturally. It might come as an image, a feeling, or a single word. Whisper, "I release the belief that this moment defines me." Then breathe softly. Now bring to mind someone who brings you peace. Someone whose presence feels gentle and grounding. Notice the warmth around the heart. Notice the relaxation in the shoulders. Whisper inwardly, "I welcome the conditions that support my awakening." Rest here for a few breaths. Let the heart settle like a bowl of water, clear, still, reflective. This is the second teaching. People enter your life as mirrors of karma, not to punish you, not to test you, but to reveal your emotional landscape so you can navigate it with wisdom. When you understand this, relationships become sacred ground for transformation. Every encounter becomes an opportunity to awaken. Every reaction becomes a doorway into deeper compassion. Nothing is random. Nothing is wasted. Each person you meet is a reflection guiding you toward yourself. The third teaching. When the heart recognizes what the mind cannot name. Have you ever met someone and felt an immediate pull that made no rational sense? A softness in your chest, a familiarity you could not explain, a quiet recognition that seemed older than your current life. Or perhaps the opposite happened. Someone entered your space and your body tightened instantly, long before they said a single unkind word. These reactions often bypass thought entirely. They arise from places deeper than logic, older than memory. In Buddhism, this is understood as the meeting of latent tendencies, the subtle threads of past conditioning resurfacing in the present moment. The heart remembers what the mind has forgotten. The Buddha taught that the mind carries impressions not only from this life, but from countless moments of experience. You do not meet people with a blank slate. You meet them through the lens of your karma, your fears, your hopes, your unresolved longings. Sometimes a person arrives and touches a wound you did not know was still open. Sometimes they awaken a peace you thought you could never feel. And sometimes they confuse you because they activate two truths at once. The part of you that wants to grow and the part of you that wants to stay safe. Let me tell you a story about a woman named Hana who lived her life with quiet caution. She had known heartbreak early, and since then she approached relationships with a kind of calculated gentleness. Never too close, never too open. She valued stability, predictability, controlled warmth. Love, she believed, was safest when kept at a distance. Yet life has a way of bringing the exact person needed to challenge the walls we build. His name was Leo. They met at a weekend workshop on mindful communication. He was kind in a way that felt disarming, the kind of person who listened with his whole presence. When he smiled at her during introductions, Hana felt something warm and unsettling bloom in her chest. She quickly looked away, telling herself it meant nothing, but the feeling lingered like a whisper she could not ignore. Throughout the workshop, whenever Leo spoke, she felt a pull not toward his words but toward the sincerity beneath them. When they were assigned to practice mindful listening in pairs, they sat facing each other in silence for 1 minute before speaking. That minute felt strangely intimate. It was as though she could feel the texture of his presence. Something in her resisted, something else in her softened. When the workshop ended, they exchanged a brief goodbye and walked out into the cool evening. Hana expected the feeling to fade once she returned to her routines, but instead, it deepened. She felt a strange clarity and confusion intertwined. She barely knew him, yet it felt as if some door inside her had been opened. Weeks passed, and she found herself thinking about him in quiet moments, not romantically, not with longing, more like her heart kept turning toward a lesson it wanted to understand. She wondered why this one person had unsettled her carefully balanced life. Why did her breath catch when she remembered his presence? Why did her chest feel warm when she imagined the steady way he listened? One evening, during meditation, she asked herself a simple question. What exactly am I feeling? The answer rose from somewhere deep, recognition. She realized she was not reacting to Leo as a person. She was reacting to what he mirrored within her. A longing for connection she had denied for years. A longing for vulnerability that frightened her. The Buddha taught that when the heart meets a familiar pattern, it responds before the mind can interpret. Sometimes that familiarity comes from childhood conditioning. Sometimes it comes from emotional wounds. Sometimes from karmic impressions that shape how we meet the world. The point is not to theorize, but to observe your reaction with clarity. The heart recognizes what needs healing. People become catalysts for that recognition. One day, while sitting in a small park, Hana saw the truth of her reaction. She realized that Leo's gentleness touched the part of her that still believed closeness was dangerous. His presence activated both the desire for intimacy and the fear of it. This inner conflict was not caused by him. It was awakened by him. With this insight, she approached her meditation teacher for guidance. The teacher listened quietly and said, "Sometimes the people who stir the strongest reactions in us are not meant to become partners. They are meant to become mirrors. They reveal the emotional terrain we have not yet explored. You do not need to pursue this connection or reject it. You only need to understand what it is teaching you." These words landed softly but deeply. Hannah realized she had been oscillating between two extremes, wanting to escape the feeling or wanting to run toward it. But the teaching suggested a third way. Simply witness. Do not cling. Do not push away. Let the reaction reveal its source. Over the next month, she practiced observing her emotions without acting on them. When she felt warmth thinking of Leo, she placed a hand on her heart and whispered, "This is longing." When she felt fear, she whispered, "This is protection." Slowly, she began to see the dance between her desire to open and her fear of being hurt. Then, something unexpected happened. During a follow-up session of the same workshop series, she saw Leo again. When he greeted her, the familiar warmth returned, but this time she felt grounded. They talked briefly. He mentioned books he enjoyed, asked about her work, laughed gently at something she said. Yet she noticed her heart responding differently. The pull was still there, but it no longer felt overwhelming. It felt informative. The fourth teaching: the people who leave are also teachers. Have you ever held on to someone long after the relationship had already ended in spirit? Maybe you replayed conversations, reread old messages, imagined different outcomes, or told yourself that if you had been wiser, kinder, stronger, things would have stayed intact. Or perhaps someone left suddenly, without explanation, leaving behind a bruise in the shape of their absence. In those moments, your heart did not simply break. It asked a question deeper than words. Why did this person come into my life at all if they were only going to walk away? The Buddha taught that all phenomena arise and pass away. He was not speaking only of clouds dissolving into sky or seasons shifting in predictable cycles. He was speaking of people too, connections too. The arrival and departure of every relationship carries meaning, even when your mind cannot see it yet. Nothing stays that is not meant to stay. Nothing leaves before its lesson is complete. When someone exits your life, they are not just leaving, they are completing a karmic moment, a subtle chapter of your awakening. Let me tell you about Adrian, a man who believed that losing people meant losing pieces of himself. He grew up watching his father walk in and out of the family home like a tide that never promised to return. As a child, he learned to cling tightly to anyone who showed him kindness. As an adult, he carried this pattern unknowingly into every relationship. When someone he loved pulled away, even gently, he felt the old childhood terror rise inside him, whispering that he was not worthy of being kept. One autumn, he met a woman named Elise. She was warm, curious, and alive in the way people are when they have survived something that transformed them. She brought color into his life effortlessly. He felt, perhaps for the first time, that he could rest in another person without performing, without pretending. They shared long walks through parks, where leaves fell like tiny prayers. They spent quiet evenings cooking simple meals, laughing easily, speaking openly about their fears and hopes. For a while, everything felt like it was finally aligning. Life seemed to be giving him what he had always needed, a gentle companionship that soothed his childhood wounds. But as months passed, subtle shifts appeared. Elise grew quieter, more distant. She stopped making plans. She smiled less often. Adrian felt the change before she spoke it. One evening, she sat across from him at his kitchen table and said, softly, that she needed to leave the relationship. She could not fully explain why, only that she felt a pull towards solitude, reflection, and a different season of life. Adrian's heart dropped as if the ground beneath him had vanished. The familiar fear roared inside him. Please stay. Tell me what to fix. Tell me how to keep you. His voice trembled, but Elise only looked at him with deep sadness. "This is not about you. It is about where my path is leading me now." He did not believe those words at first. They felt like gentle lies people tell to make parting less painful. After she left, Adrian spiraled into self-blame. His mind searched for evidence of his inadequacy. Days blurred into nights, nights into long, silent mornings. He stopped eating well. He stopped seeing friends. He existed inside a fog of abandonment so thick that even sunlight felt heavy. One afternoon, exhausted from crying, he walked aimlessly into a small Buddhist center near his apartment. A monk welcomed him with a soft smile and invited him to sit. Without planning to, Adrian poured out his entire story. The monk listened with stillness so steady that it felt like leaning against a mountain. When Adrian finally ran out of tears, the monk placed a cup of warm tea in his hands and said something that broke him open in a new way. "People do not leave because your worth changes. They leave because your shared conditions have completed their purpose." Adrian stared at him, confused. The monk continued, "In every relationship, there are causes and conditions that bring two people together. When those conditions shift, the connection naturally changes. Sometimes it deepens, sometimes it dissolves. The departure is not a failure, it is a transition." These words were a balm to the wound inside him, yet they also frightened him. "Does that mean I was never meant to keep her?" he asked. The monk shook his head gently. "Nothing in life is meant to be kept, not permanently, not even your own breath. But while she was here, she brought forward something essential in you. Can you see it?" Adrian did not answer immediately, but in the weeks that followed, he began to look inward with curiosity instead of fear. He noticed how deeply he feared being abandoned. He noticed how quickly he assumed responsibility for other people's choices. He noticed that when Elise pulled away, his old childhood wound tore open, not because she harmed him intentionally, but because her departure touched a buried tenderness. One evening, during meditation, a realization dawned on him with surprising gentleness. Elise did not leave to hurt him. She left because her path required it, and her leaving revealed the place in him still aching to be healed. In this way, her departure was not the end of something meaningful. It was the beginning of his deeper understanding. The Buddha taught that loss is not a punishment, but a form of guidance. When someone leaves your life, they often leave behind the lesson you most need at that moment. Sometimes the lesson is resilience, sometimes self-worth, sometimes the courage to let go. Sometimes the recognition that your identity cannot be built around who stays or who leaves. And sometimes the lesson is simply this: you can survive endings that once felt impossible. Months passed. Adrian gradually rebuilt his life. He practiced meditation each morning, placing a hand on his heart and whispering, "May I learn to hold myself with kindness." He journaled about his fears and patterns. He learned to sit with loneliness without letting it devour him. He reached out to friends again. He became more spacious in his relationships, more honest about his needs. One day, he realized with surprise that thinking of Elise no longer hurt. Instead, he felt gratitude. She had been a chapter, not the book, a teacher, not a mistake, someone whose presence awakened parts of him that had been numb for years. Her leaving had forced him to meet himself, to see himself, to heal himself. This is the fourth teaching. The people who leave your life are not interruptions. They are catalysts. Their departure is not a failure in your story. It is a turning point in your awakening. When they walk away, they take with them only what is no longer needed and leave behind exactly what is. Now let us turn to practice. Find a quiet place. Sit comfortably. Let your breath soften. Bring to mind someone who has left your life and whose absence still echoes in your heart. Notice the feelings that arise: tightness, sadness, anger, longing, loneliness. Do not push any of it away. Whisper inwardly, I allow this feeling to exist. Breathe gently. Whisper, this person came into my life for a reason. Breathe. Whisper, their departure carries meaning too. Let the breath create space around the memory. Let the heart soften toward what once felt unbearable. Now, ask yourself, what did this connection awaken in me? What did it teach me? What strength did I discover because of this ending? There is no need for immediate answers. Simply asking the questions begins the transformation. Place a hand over your heart and whisper, may I learn to release what no longer aligns with my path. Whisper again, may I honor the lessons left behind. Stay here for a few breaths. Let the heart steady itself. Let the past loosen its grip. The people who leave are not accidents. They are teachers, disguised as endings. They guide you toward yourself. They prepare you for deeper love, wiser choices, and a more liberated heart. When you can see this clearly, departure loses its cruelty. It becomes a form of grace. This is the nature of impermanence. Not to take away what you need, but to carry you gently toward what is next. The fifth teaching, the hidden guidance of difficult people. Have you ever wondered why the people who challenge you the most seem to appear at the exact moments when life already feels heavy? The colleague who questions your every idea, the relative whose criticism cuts deeper than it should, the friend who disappears when you need them most. These encounters are rarely pleasant, yet they linger in your heart longer than the moments of kindness. You replay their words. You feel the old wounds they touch. You ask yourself why life sends such people into your path when all you want is peace. The Buddha taught that not all teachers arrive with gentle hands. Some arrive as difficulty, irritation, disappointment. Their purpose is not to harm you, but to illuminate the parts of your heart still waiting to awaken. In this way, difficult people are among the most powerful guides on the spiritual path. They reveal your triggers. They expose the edges of your patience. They reflect the wounds still living inside you. They show you where your compassion ends and where it could expand. Let me tell you about a woman named Naomi. She was calm by nature, slow to anger, thoughtful in her words. Yet there was one person who could unravel her inner peace instantly. His name was Victor, a co-worker whose tone carried subtle condescension. He interrupted her during meetings. He dismissed her suggestions with a shrug. He questioned her decisions even when she had more experience than him. Naomi prided herself on her maturity, yet around him she felt the familiar heat of irritation rising in her chest. She tried to avoid him. She reminded herself to breathe before responding. She repeated silent mantras of patience, yet every interaction with him awakened the same frustration. One afternoon, after a particularly tense meeting, she sat alone in her car, gripping the steering wheel. Why does he get to me so easily? Why can I stay centered with so many others but not with him? That evening she attended her weekly meditation group. After sitting in silence, she spoke softly about her struggles with Victor. The teacher listened with steady attention and then asked, "What exactly is he awakening in you?" The question startled her. She had focused so much on his behavior that she had never explored her own reaction. The teacher continued, "Often the people who disturb us the most carry the shape of old wounds. They are not causing the wound, they are touching it." Naomi sat with these words for days. Slowly she began observing her emotional patterns with curiosity rather than judgment. She noticed the tightness in her chest, the sharpness in her breath, the sinking feeling in her stomach whenever Victor spoke over her. One evening, during meditation, a buried memory surfaced. She remembered being a child, raising her hand in class, only to be mocked by a group of students who told her that her voice did not matter. The humiliation had been so sharp that she stopped speaking up for months. She had forgotten this memory, yet its imprint lived quietly in her heart. Victor was not mocking her, he was not intentionally harming her, but his behavior echoed that childhood humiliation so precisely that her body reacted before her mind understood. He was not the cause, he was the mirror. The next time they interacted, Naomi watched her reaction arising in real time. The irritation was still there, but she felt less controlled by it. She placed a silent hand on her thigh beneath the table and whispered internally, "This is my old pain, not a new attack." The moment she acknowledged this truth, something softened inside her. She was no longer fighting him. She was tending to herself. Over the following weeks, her relationship with Victor shifted in surprising ways. She began listening to the tone beneath his interruptions and realized he often spoke quickly because he was anxious, not arrogant. She noticed his eyes darting nervously during presentations. She saw how he used authority as a shield to hide insecurity. What once looked like superiority now looked like fear wearing armor. This recognition did not excuse his behavior, but it changed her internal experience. She no longer felt personally attacked. Instead, she saw two sets of wounds meeting in the same conversation. Her childhood silence, his lifelong insecurity, two people protecting themselves, neither truly seeing the other. The Buddha taught that compassion arises naturally when we see clearly, not by forcing kindness, not by suppressing hurt, but by understanding the suffering beneath the surface. When Naomi saw Victor's fear beneath his sharpness, her irritation softened into empathy. One afternoon, she gently asked him if he needed support with an upcoming project. He looked startled, then relieved. Slowly, their interactions became less tense, not because he changed completely, but because she no longer met him from the place of old pain. Months later, her meditation teacher asked what she had learned from this experience. Naomi smiled and said, "He was the teacher I did not want, but needed." The teacher nodded. That is often how the deepest lessons arrive. Difficult people are not obstacles to peace. They are invitations to expand it. They reveal your boundaries. They show you where forgiveness has not yet taken root. They push you toward clarity and self-awareness. They invite you to step out of the patterns you inherited and into the patterns you choose. Now let us turn this understanding into practice. Find a comfortable position. Let your breath settle gently. Bring to mind someone who challenges you, not the most painful person in your history, but someone who stirs discomfort. Notice the sensations that arise in your body. Tightness, heat, tension, restlessness. Do not push anything away. Whisper inwardly, "This reaction belongs to me." Then breathe softly. Whisper, "This person is revealing a part of me still learning." Let your breath move like warm wind through the tight places. Now ask, what old story is awakened by this person? You do not need a perfect answer. Trust the heart to reveal the truth over time. Whisper, "May I meet this lesson with compassion." Whisper again, "May I respond with wisdom rather than habit." Rest with this for a few breaths. Feel the space that opens when you stop seeing difficult people as enemies and begin seeing them as teachers. This is the fifth teaching. The people who disturb your peace are often the ones who expand it. They bring to the surface the wounds you have carried for years. They reveal the emotional patterns that limit your freedom. They challenge your patience, your humility, your boundaries, your compassion. And in doing so, they guide you toward deeper awakening. In this way, difficult people do not enter your life by accident. They enter like stones that sharpen your inner blade, preparing you for clarity, resilience, and profound understanding. The sixth teaching: the quiet guardians who appear in moments of collapse. Have you ever noticed that in your hardest seasons, when everything feels like it is falling apart, a certain kind of person appears? Not necessarily a soulmate, not a lifelong companion, not someone who promises to stay forever. Often they are someone unexpected, a co-worker you barely spoke to before, a neighbor you only greeted in passing, a friend you had lost touch with. They arrive with a softness that does not demand anything from you. They offer presence rather than solutions, comfort rather than advice. They are the quiet guardians of your path. The Buddha taught that all beings are connected through a network of conditions. When your suffering deepens, conditions shift in subtle ways, drawing certain people toward you who carry the energy you need to stabilize. These connections are often temporary, but they are never accidental. They arise when your heart is too heavy to carry its burden alone. They are like lanterns placed along a dark road, bright enough to help you take the next step, but never meant to illuminate your entire life. Let me tell you a story about Jonah. He was a man whose life, from the outside, looked steady. He had a stable job, a small apartment, a routine that gave structure to his days. But inside, he carried a grief that quietly shaped his world. His younger brother had passed away suddenly 2 years earlier, and Jonah had learned to function without ever learning to feel. He moved through life in a muted haze, avoiding conversations that touched the wound. When people asked how he was coping, he answered with practiced lines. "I am taking it day by day. I am doing my best." The truth was that he was surviving, not living. One winter evening, Jonah sat alone in a laundromat, waiting for his clothes to dry. Snow tapped softly against the windows. His chest felt heavy, as it had for months. He buried his face in his hands, feeling the weight of unspoken grief pressing inward. He did not cry. He could not. It was as if his tears had frozen somewhere inside him. A woman sitting 2 chairs away noticed his stillness. Her name was Mara. She had seen him in the building before, but they had never spoken. Something about the way he sat, the quiet collapse in his posture, stirred a memory of her own past struggles. She did not ask intrusive questions. She simply said gently, "Looks like today has been a long one." Jonah managed a small nod. Something about her tone softened the walls around his heart. They exchanged a few simple sentences, nothing profound. Yet, something in that brief conversation eased the pressure in his chest. It was not her words that helped him, it was her presence. Over the next few weeks, they crossed paths more often. Sometimes in the lobby, sometimes at the corner cafe. Mara never pried. She simply offered a calmness that felt grounding. Jonah found himself opening up bit by bit. He told her about his brother, about the silence that settled over him after the funeral, about the guilt he carried for moving on and the guilt he carried for not moving on. Mara listened with a depth that felt rare. One evening she said softly, "Grief is not a burden to carry alone. Sometimes the heart survives by leaning." Jonah had never thought of grief that way. He had believed strength meant enduring everything without support. But Mara's presence taught him something different. She did not rescue him. She did not fix him. She offered something far more powerful: companionship in the dark. The Buddha taught that when the heart is overwhelmed, the presence of a compassionate friend can act as a stabilizing condition. Not to take away suffering, but to keep the mind from drowning in it. Such people are called kalyanamitta, spiritual friends. Even if they do not speak of spirituality, they are the quiet guardians who appear when the heart is too tired to bear itself. As the months passed, Jonah began attending grief support meetings. He started journaling. He practiced mindful breathing. Slowly, the frozen places in his heart began to thaw. One day, after leaving a support meeting, he walked past the park where he and his brother used to play as children. For the first time since the loss, he let himself cry fully, not with despair, but with tenderness. It was a breaking open that felt like healing rather than collapse. When he saw Mara a few days later, he told her about it. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and said, "Sometimes the heart needs permission to feel again. You gave it that permission." Jonah realized something profound in that moment. Mara had entered his life, not to stay forever, but to guide him through a threshold he could not cross alone. She was a lantern on his path during a season of darkness. When he finally found his footing again, their connection shifted naturally. They remained friendly but no longer depended on each other. The season of guardianship had fulfilled its purpose. This is the nature of quiet guardians. They appear not as permanent fixtures, but as conditions aligned with your deepest needs. Their timing feels mysterious, almost divine, yet it is simply the natural unfolding of interdependence. When your suffering reaches a certain threshold, the universe responds through people, offering gentle assistance in human form. Now let us turn this teaching into practice. Sit comfortably. Allow your breath to soften. Bring to mind someone who appeared in your life during a difficult season, someone who brought steadiness, kindness, or clarity. Notice how your body responds to this memory. Warmth in the chest, softening in the shoulders, a sense of being held. Whisper inwardly, "Thank you for being a condition of my healing." Breathe slowly. Whisper, "May I offer this same presence to others when their hearts are heavy." Feel the truth of these words settling gently within you. Now imagine yourself surrounded by quiet guardians you have not yet met, individuals who will appear in future moments of struggle. Whisper, "May I trust the support that life sends me." Breathe again. This is the sixth teaching. Not all guidance arrives with dramatic lessons or profound conversations. Sometimes guidance arrives in small moments of connection, in simple human presence, in the quiet understanding of someone who has seen their own darkness and learned how to sit with another person's pain. These people do not enter your life by accident. They enter as guardians of your unfolding, anchors in your storms, reminders that even on the darkest nights, you do not walk alone. The seventh teaching, soul crossings and the people who change your direction without staying. Have you ever met someone who entered your life for such a brief moment that it almost felt unreal? Yet the impact they left shaped you more deeply than people you had known for years? These are not ordinary encounters. They arrive suddenly, stir the waters of your heart, awaken something sleeping inside you, and then disappear as quietly as they came. You look back months or even years later and realize that their presence changed the entire course of your life. In Buddhism, these moments are sometimes described as soul crossings, meetings where two paths touch just long enough for transformation, then drift apart because the teaching has been fulfilled. The Buddha taught that the world is woven by interdependent connections. Some threads stay with you for decades, others touch your life for seconds. The length of the connection does not determine its importance. A single moment of insight can redirect a lifetime. A single sentence can dissolve years of confusion. A single encounter can reveal a truth you have avoided seeing. When such people appear, they are like wind shifting the direction of a sailboat. They may not travel with you, but they send you toward a new horizon. Let me tell you the story of a man named Elias. He was a talented musician who had spent years drifting in and out of creative blocks. His heart carried melodies he longed to express, but his mind was thick with doubt. Every time he wrote a new piece, he heard his inner critic whispering that it was not good enough, that he was not good enough, that his dreams were unrealistic. He survived by playing small gigs, teaching part-time lessons, and convincing himself that one day inspiration would return. One evening, he performed at a quiet cafe. The room was dimly lit, filled with the soft hum of people sipping tea and speaking in low voices. When Elias finished his final song, he felt the familiar wave of disappointment wash over him. He believed the music lacked heart, lacked authenticity. He packed his guitar slowly, avoiding eye contact with the audience. As he turned to leave, a woman approached him. She looked no more than 30, wearing a simple scarf and carrying a backpack. Her eyes held a depth that felt both gentle and piercing. She said, "Your music feels like someone trying very hard not to let themselves be seen." Elias froze. The sentence struck him harder than any criticism he had ever received. Before he could respond, she continued, "You have a beautiful sorrow inside your sound, but you are afraid to allow it to breathe." Her words were unsettling because they were true. Elias had spent years protecting himself from vulnerability. His father had dismissed his dreams when he was young. His first mentor had belittled him. His first love had left him without explanation. Somewhere along the way, he learned to hide his heart inside his craft, to play correctly rather than courageously. The woman sensed the storm inside him. She smiled gently and said, "Pain does not disappear when you silence it. Pain disappears when you listen to it." Then she thanked him for his performance and left the cafe. He never saw her again, but something inside him shifted. That single conversation echoed through his mind for days. He realized he had spent years creating music as armor instead of offering it as truth. He began sitting with his guitar each morning, playing not to impress but to feel. He allowed sadness to shape his chords. He allowed longing to shape his lyrics. He let honesty guide his hands instead of technique. For the first time in years, music poured out of him with raw sincerity. He wrote songs that made him cry. He wrote melodies that touched a place beyond words. He felt himself returning to the artist he had been before the world taught him to fear his own heart. Months later, he performed again at the same cafe. This time he played with tenderness rather than fear. He did not search the room for approval. He simply offered his truth. When he finished, the audience was silent for a moment, then applauded with a depth that felt different, not polite, but moved. As he stepped outside into the cool night air, he whispered inwardly, "Thank you to the stranger who awakened this in me." She had crossed his path for only a minute, but her presence changed his direction more than any long-term relationship he had ever had. This is the essence of soul crossings. People who appear not to stay, but to awaken. In the Buddhist teachings, these encounters are not random. They occur when a specific karmic condition ripens, when the heart is ready for transformation. Life sends the right messenger. Not always a teacher, not always a monk, sometimes a stranger, sometimes a passerby, sometimes someone who does not realize they have changed you. These people serve as turning points. They do not walk the journey with you, but they reveal the fork in the road. Whether you choose the new direction is up to you. Let us explore another story, this time of a young woman named Mira. She was 22, standing at the threshold between who she was and who she wanted to become. She worked a stable job, lived with predictable routines, and suppressed the faint but persistent desire to explore the world. She told herself she was too shy, too insecure, too unprepared. She created a story of limitation and lived inside it as if it were truth. One summer, she traveled alone for the first time to attend a meditation retreat. On the second day, she met an elderly man sitting by a pond, tossing crumbs of bread to ducks while humming a soft melody. Something about him radiated ease. Mira felt drawn to sit beside him. They spoke about simple things, the weather, the retreat schedule, the beauty of the pond. After a long pause, he looked at her and asked, "Why are you here?" His tone was gentle, but the question reached deeper than she expected. She hesitated, then said softly, "I think I want to change my life, but I am afraid." The man smiled, eyes bright with compassion. Afraid of what? She thought about it. Of failing, of choosing wrong, of disappointing others, of disappointing myself. He nodded, as if he had heard these fears thousands of times. Then he said something that marked her forever. Fear is a sign that your world is about to grow. If you walk away from the edge every time, your life will remain smaller than your heart desires. She felt tears rising unexpectedly. The man continued, "I have lived many years. The regrets people carry are rarely about what they tried. The deepest regrets come from what they avoided. You do not need to be fearless. You only need to take one step more than your fear allows." Then he stood slowly, smiled again, and walked away. Mira never saw him again. Yet his words became her compass. After the retreat, she applied for a position abroad. She moved to a new country. She made new friends, learned a new language, built a new version of herself. All because a stranger by a pond offered the exact wisdom she needed at the exact moment her heart was able to receive it. The Buddha taught that wisdom can be transmitted through presence, not just instruction. Not all teachers carry titles. Not all lessons require long relationships. Sometimes clarity arrives in a single sentence, spoken by someone whose life briefly touches yours like wind passing across still water. Now, let us turn to practice. Sit comfortably. Breathe softly. Bring to mind a person who appeared for only a short time yet changed something within you. Notice the feelings that arise: warmth, gratitude, nostalgia, softness. Whisper inwardly, "Thank you for crossing paths with me." Breathe gently. Now imagine future encounters awaiting you. People you have not met yet, who will arrive with lessons wrapped inside their presence. Whisper, "May I be awake enough to recognize the teachers life sends me." Whisper again, "May I welcome transformation, even when it arrives unexpectedly." This is the seventh teaching. Some people are not meant to stay. They are meant to awaken. They come to reveal truth, to redirect your path, to nudge your heart toward courage, creativity, love, or authenticity. Their brief presence carries the weight of a lifetime, and though they may leave quickly, their impact does not fade. It becomes part of the architecture of your becoming. They are reminders that awakening is not always gradual. Sometimes it arrives instantly, delivered by a stranger whose name you might never know. The eighth teaching. The ones who trigger your awakening by breaking your illusions. Have you ever met someone who shattered your assumptions about yourself, your relationships, or your life so forcefully that you could not return to who you were before? It may have been a romantic partner who revealed the truth about your patterns. A friend who disappointed you at the exact moment you thought they never would. A mentor whose honesty cut deeper than criticism but ultimately freed you. These people do not enter with gentle hands. They arrive like storms. They break what is fragile, expose what is hidden, and leave you standing in the ruins of your previous beliefs. And yet, strangely, the space that appears afterward feels more honest than anything you built before. The Buddha taught that suffering often arises not from reality, but from the illusions you create about it. These illusions are subtle. You believe you are unconditionally strong until someone reveals your vulnerability. You believe you are always kind until someone pushes the edges of your patience. You believe a relationship is stable until its cracks come into the light. Awakening begins when illusion breaks, and sometimes life uses people as mirrors sharp enough to cut through what you refuse to see. Let me tell you about a young man named Rowan. He was bright, charismatic, and outwardly confident. He inspired others with his optimism. He smiled easily. He rarely showed frustration. His friends admired how grounded he seemed, but beneath that polished exterior lived a deep fear of conflict. As a child, he learned that expressing anger led to punishment, so he became skilled at avoidance. When tension arose, he fled. When hurt appeared, he swallowed it. When boundaries were crossed, he convinced himself it was not important. He believed maintaining harmony made him mature. He believed keeping everyone happy made him good. Then he met a woman named Lila. She was direct, intuitive, and surprisingly perceptive. She had a way of seeing through masks without effort. In the early months of their relationship, Rowan admired her honesty, but soon her clarity began to reveal things he had spent years hiding. When he avoided difficult conversations, she gently pressed him. When he brushed aside hurt feelings, she asked him to name them. When he acted cheerful despite obvious tension, she said, "I can feel you closing your heart." Her words struck him each time, but instead of revealing vulnerability, they awakened defensiveness. Rowan insisted he was fine. He told himself she was too emotional, too sensitive, too demanding. He clung to the illusion that he was peaceful while she was intense. But beneath his rationalizations lived a truth he did not want to face. She was reflecting the fear he had spent his entire life avoiding. One evening, they had a disagreement about something small, a misplaced comment, a moment of miscommunication. But instead of brushing it aside, Lila sat down across from him and said, "Rowan, you cannot keep pretending you are not angry. I can feel it." He froze. No one had ever spoken to him that way, not accusing, not criticizing, simply naming what he worked so hard to hide. His chest tightened, his throat closed, his mind searched for escape, but she continued, "Your silence is not peace. It is fear." The illusion cracked. Tears he had not felt in years rose suddenly. He turned away, overwhelmed. Lila reached out and placed a gentle hand on his arm. "It is okay. You do not need to hide your truth with me." In that moment, something inside him collapsed. The identity he had built, the calm, cheerful, endlessly patient persona crumbled, and beneath it, raw and trembling, was the part of him he had abandoned long ago. His anger, his hurt, his longing to be understood without having to perform. For weeks after that conversation, Rowan felt disoriented. He questioned everything he believed about himself. He noticed how often he apologized unnecessarily, how often he dismissed his own needs, how often he stayed silent to avoid disappointing others. Leela had not created these realizations. She had only held up the mirror. But the story does not end in healing, at least not immediately. As Rowan began confronting deeper truths, tension between them grew. His awakening brought emotional volatility he was not prepared for. Lila supported him as best she could, but she could not do his inner work for him. Eventually their paths diverged, not in anger but in clarity. She had played her role. She had awakened his truth. But the journey ahead was his alone. For a time, Rowan felt lost. Yet in the quiet aftermath, he began practicing mindfulness, something he had resisted before. He sat each morning, paying attention to his breath, noticing how much fear lived beneath every exhale. He journaled about the childhood experiences that shaped his avoidance. He realized he had never allowed himself to feel anger because he feared losing love. Slowly, breath by breath, he learned that honest emotion does not destroy connection. Illusion does. Years later, he would admit that Lila was one of the most important people he ever met. not because she stayed, but because she broke the illusions that kept him small. This is the nature of illusion-breaking teachers. They arrive not to comfort you, but to awaken you. They challenge your narratives. They expose your patterns. They disrupt your fantasies. They refuse to accept the version of you that hides from truth. And when the illusion crumbles, the first light of wisdom appears. Another story illustrates this beautifully. A woman named Tessa had always believed she was deeply compassionate. She volunteered, donated, offered emotional support to friends. Yet she had one blind spot. She could not accept criticism. Any feedback felt like an attack. Any disagreement felt like betrayal. She equated compassion with agreement and took pride in being the peacemaker. Then she met a mentor during a professional training program. His name was Dr. Hale, a calm, perceptive teacher with a gift for revealing truth without cruelty. After observing her interactions, he said one afternoon, "You have a tender heart, but you use compassion to avoid discomfort. Kindness without boundaries is not compassion. It is fear of conflict." Tessa felt heat rise in her face. She wanted to argue, to defend herself, to deny, but deep inside she knew his words were true. For weeks, she wrestled with the discomfort of the mirror he had held up. She began noticing how often she said yes when she meant no, how often she prioritized others to avoid disapproval, how often she retreated when confronted with disagreement. His honesty cracked her illusion, but the cracking made space for integrity. Over the next year, she learned to set boundaries gently, to speak truth respectfully, to recognize that real compassion includes clarity, not just softness. She grew into a version of herself that felt more grounded, more authentic, more balanced. This is what illusion-breaking teachers do, not through force, but through truth. Now let us turn this teaching into practice. Sit comfortably. Allow your breath to settle. Bring to mind someone who shattered an illusion you once held about yourself or your life. Notice the emotions rising. Perhaps gratitude, perhaps discomfort, perhaps both. Whisper inwardly, "Thank you for showing me what I could not see." Breathe gently. Now ask, what illusion was broken? What truth emerged in its place? Whisper, "May I meet truth with courage." Whisper again, "May I grow beyond the limits of my old stories." Rest with this awareness for a few breaths. This is the 8th teaching. Some people do not enter your life to comfort you. They enter to awaken you. Their presence breaks illusions. Their honesty shakes the foundations of your fears. Their departure forces you to stand on your own ground. And though their lessons may be difficult, they leave you with a gift, the freedom that comes only from seeing clearly. They are not accidents, they are catalysts. The 9th teaching, the ones who arrive to teach you how to love yourself. Have you ever met someone whose presence made you feel seen in a way you had not experienced before? Someone who noticed the exhaustion behind your smile, the longing behind your strength, the tenderness behind your defenses. They did not rescue you. They did not complete you. They did something far more important. They reflected your own worth back to you at a time when you had forgotten how to recognize it. The Buddha taught that love rooted in attachment creates suffering, but love rooted in awareness liberates. Many people misunderstand this teaching, believing that Buddhism discourages connection. But in truth, Buddhist teachings illuminate a different kind of connection, one that does not ask another person to heal you, but invites you to discover your own wholeness. Sometimes life sends a person whose presence quietly initiates this discovery. They enter not to take care of you, but to awaken the way you take care of yourself. Let me tell you about a woman named Clara. She was kind, thoughtful, and dependable, the sort of person others trusted instinctively. When someone needed help, she was there. When someone needed comfort, she offered it. Her compassion was genuine, but underneath it lived a different truth. She believed she had to earn love by giving endlessly. She rarely asked for support. She rarely expressed frustration. She swallowed her needs so deeply that she no longer recognized them. Then she met someone named Adrian, a friend of a friend who joined their hiking group one summer. He had a calm presence that felt grounded rather than distant. He asked thoughtful questions. He listened without trying to fix anything. One afternoon, as they walked along a forest trail, he slowed his pace to walk beside her. "You give a lot to others," he said gently. "Do you ever let anyone give to you?" The question startled her. She laughed it off at first, but his eyes held a sincerity that made her chest tighten. She muttered something vague about not wanting to burden people. Adrian nodded softly. "I used to feel the same," he said, "until someone reminded me that refusing to receive can also be a form of fear." His words stayed with her long after the hike ended. Fear. She had never thought of her selflessness as fear. She believed it was generosity, strength, kindness. But that night, as she lay awake in bed, she realized how often she pushed people away with her independence. How often she felt lonely despite being surrounded by others. How often she resented the very people she tried so hard to care for, because the giving was never mutual. Over the next few months, she and Adrian grew closer, not romantically, but meaningfully. He noticed when she looked overwhelmed during group conversations. He asked how she was doing and waited for real answers. He reminded her gently when she apologized for things that did not require apology. Each time he reflected her worth back to her, she felt something inside her soften and something else panic. One afternoon, they sat at a cafe beneath warm sunlight. Clara was unusually quiet. After a long pause, she whispered, "I do not know how to let people care about me." Adrian took a slow breath and said, "You do not have to know, you only have to let it be possible." That single sentence became a turning point. She realized that receiving did not require perfection, only willingness. For the first time in her life, she began practicing small acts of openness. When a co-worker offered help, she said yes instead of insisting she could manage alone. When a friend asked how she was doing, she answered honestly instead of brushing it aside. When she felt tired, she allowed herself to rest rather than pushing through out of obligation. Self-love did not arrive like a grand revelation. It grew like moss quietly, slowly, gently, in places she had forgotten to look. But awakening is rarely linear. One evening after a stressful week, Clara spiraled into old patterns. She told herself she was weak for struggling. She felt ashamed for needing help. She withdrew from her friends. She ignored messages. She sat alone in her apartment, heart heavy, believing she had undone months of progress. Then her phone buzzed. A simple message from Adrian. "You do not have to disappear when you are hurting." She stared at the words for a long time. Then, with trembling hands, she replied, "I do not know how to let people stay when I feel like this." Adrian responded, "Let them see you. You are not hard to love. You are only not used to being held." Something inside her broke open. Tears slipped down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from recognition. She had spent her entire life believing she had to earn love. But what if love simply required presence? What if loving herself meant allowing others to love her too? In the weeks that followed, Clara began a simple meditation practice. Each morning she placed a hand over her heart and whispered, "May I be gentle with myself." At first, the words felt foreign, almost embarrassing. She was used to pushing, performing, pleasing, but gradually the practice became a refuge. She breathed more deeply. She treated herself more softly. She noticed the critical voice inside her and began loosening its grip. The Buddha taught that metta, loving kindness, begins with oneself. You cannot extend genuine compassion to others if your own heart is starved. Clara had believed that loving herself was selfish. Now she understood it as essential. Months passed. Her relationship with Adrian shifted naturally as their lives moved in different directions. They remained close, but the intensity of their early connection softened. He had been a catalyst, not a permanent pillar. His presence had awakened a truth she needed to learn. Self-love is not built through admiration from others, but through the courage to receive, to rest, to allow, to trust. This is the 9th teaching. Some people enter your life to teach you how to love yourself, not by showering you with affection, not by saving you, but by reflecting your worth in ways your own mind has forgotten. They model gentleness until you can offer it to yourself. They ask questions that reveal your hidden wounds. They show you where self-neglect has disguised itself as kindness. They challenge the stories that keep you small. And then, when the lesson is rooted, they often step back, not because the connection was shallow, but because its purpose was complete. Now, let us turn this into practice. Sit comfortably, breathe softly, place one hand over your heart if it feels natural. Bring to mind someone who helped you see your own worth, maybe through kindness, maybe through honesty, maybe through simply being present when you could not hold yourself. Whisper inwardly, "Thank you for reminding me of my value." Breathe gently. Whisper, "May I learn to offer myself the love others saw in me." Feel the breath like warm light moving through your chest. Whisper, "May I be willing to receive care. May I be willing to rest. May I be willing to soften." Let these words settle like seeds. This is the 9th teaching. The people who teach you how to love yourself are sacred. They enter your path not by accident but by alignment. They appear when your heart is ready, or almost ready, to remember its own worth. Their presence is a bridge. Their departure is not abandonment. It is permission to walk forward on your own. You do not lose them. You carry what they awakened. The 10th teaching. The ones who arrive to break your cycles and redirect your fate. Have you ever noticed that certain people appear right when you are repeating an old pattern? The same unhealthy relationship dynamic, the same self-sabotaging habit, the same fear-based decision, and their presence disrupts everything. It may feel uncomfortable at first. You may resist them, misunderstand them, even push them away. Yet somehow, after meeting them, you can no longer continue living as you did before. These people do not enter your life to comfort your patterns. They enter to interrupt them. The Buddha taught that patterns are powerful, especially when they arise from unconscious conditioning. You repeat what is familiar, even when it hurts. You choose what resembles old wounds, even when you long for healing. You cling to outdated identities, even when the heart is ready to grow. To break a cycle, awareness must enter the system. And sometimes, life sends that awareness in the form of another human being whose presence challenges your inertia. Let me tell you about a man named Theo. For years he moved through relationships with a quiet but persistent fear of abandonment. Whenever someone grew close to him, he panicked. He would withdraw emotionally, become distant, or end the connection abruptly. The cycle replayed with painful predictability. His partners felt confused and hurt. Theo felt ashamed afterward, but did not understand why the fear was so overwhelming. Then he met someone named Iris. She was warm, patient, and emotionally attuned. She noticed the subtle shifts in his tone. She recognized the tremble between his words. She sensed the moment he began to retreat. Unlike others, she did not chase him or demand explanations. She simply said, "You disappear right at the moment someone begins to care about you." Theo felt exposed. No one had ever named his pattern so clearly. He tried to deny it, but when he looked inward, the truth was undeniable. Fear dictated the rhythm of his relationships. Past wounds whispered louder than present reality. He was not protecting himself from others. He was protecting himself from vulnerability. For weeks he avoided seeing Iris, overwhelmed by the clarity she brought. But something in him had shifted. He could no longer hide behind the story that he was better off alone. Her words kept echoing inside him, challenging the narrative he had lived by for years. One afternoon, he finally asked her to meet for coffee. With trembling honesty, he said, "When you pointed out my fear, it felt like you were holding up a mirror I have avoided all my life." Iris nodded gently. Patterns lose their power when seen clearly. Awareness breaks cycles. For the first time, Theo considered the possibility that his pattern could change. Iris did not offer to fix him. She did not ask for a relationship. Her role was simpler and far more profound. She awakened awareness. Over the next months, Theo began therapy. He explored the childhood memories that shaped his fear. He learned to name his emotions instead of fleeing from them. He practiced staying present during discomfort. His cycles did not break overnight, but each time he felt the urge to retreat, he remembered Iris' words not as criticism, but as guidance. Their connection eventually faded, not through conflict, but through natural drift. She had played her role. Her presence interrupted a pattern that had shaped his life for decades. And in doing so, she redirected his fate. Theo would later say that meeting her was the moment he stopped running from himself. This is the nature of cycle breakers. They enter your life not to stay, but to awaken a shift so deep that returning to your old patterns becomes impossible. Another story reveals a different kind of pattern breaking. Her name was Mira, a woman who repeatedly chose partners who undervalued her. She was strong, intelligent, and intuitive, yet she settled for relationships where she was tolerated rather than cherished. Her therapist had told her for years that she was reenacting childhood abandonment by choosing emotionally unavailable partners. Mira understood this intellectually, but nothing changed. Then she met a man named Cal, not as a lover, but as a colleague. Cal valued her ideas instantly. He treated her thoughts with respect. He asked for her opinion. He noticed her strengths. His presence reflected a version of herself she had never been allowed to see. One afternoon, after a team meeting, Cal turned to her and said, "You speak softly, but your insights are powerful. Stop shrinking. The room needs your voice." Her throat tightened. No one had spoken to her like that before. She realized at that moment that she had been walking through the world as a diminished version of herself, not because she lacked worth, but because she had forgotten it. Cal did not stay in her life long. He transferred departments a month later, but the shift he awakened could not be undone. Mira left a relationship that drained her. She pursued a leadership role she had always believed she was unqualified for. She began speaking with confidence. She began choosing people who reflected her worth rather than her wounds. Cal had broken the cycle simply by showing her a different reflection. The Buddha taught that when the mind becomes ready for transformation, the universe rearranges conditions to support that change. Often, this rearrangement arrives through people, and once the cycle is broken, the karmic momentum weakens, like a wheel slowing on its own. Now let us turn to practice. Sit comfortably, breathe gently. Bring to mind someone whose presence disrupted your patterns, someone who challenged your assumptions, awakened discomfort, or pushed you to see something you resisted. Feel the sensations that arise. Perhaps gratitude, perhaps confusion, perhaps soft grief. Whisper inwardly, "Thank you for awakening what I was not ready to see." Now bring awareness to the cycle they helped break. Whisper, "May I continue walking forward, free from the old pattern." Breathe slowly. Whisper, "May I recognize the cycle before it repeats. May I choose differently." Let these words settle like seeds in fertile soil. This is the 10th teaching. Some people enter your life not to accompany you, not to comfort you, not to love you, but to interrupt your suffering. They expose the habits that keep you small. They break the illusions that keep you repeating the past. They open the door to a new way of living, even if they do not walk through that door with you. They are not accidents. They are catalysts, sent by life at the exact moment your soul is ready to change. The 11th teaching, the invisible threads that connect all encounters. There is a moment in every life when you stop asking why someone entered it and start asking what part of yourself they revealed. It may not happen right away. When someone leaves without closure or brings more questions than answers, your mind races to understand. What did it mean? What could I have done differently? Why now? And why like this? But in the stillness that follows loss, confusion, or transformation, you begin to see something deeper, that every meeting was not random, but part of a larger unfolding. That people do not simply walk in, they are drawn in by invisible threads, woven from your karma, your lessons, your longings, and your soul's evolution. The Buddha taught that nothing arises without conditions. Nothing enters or exits your field of experience without a reason. He called this principle pratitya samutpada, dependent origination. In simple terms, it means this exists because that exists. This arises because that arose. And so too with people. Let me tell you about Lynn. Lynn was a quiet, introspective woman who had been on a path of healing for years. Therapy, meditation, journaling, reading books on trauma, childhood wounds, spiritual bypassing. She was self-aware, kind, even wise, but she carried a silent belief that she was not truly lovable, that even with all her growth, something about her was fundamentally too much. Then she met Julian. He entered her life like a warm breeze, unexpected, easy, open-hearted. He listened to her stories without flinching. He celebrated her passions. He reminded her that tenderness was not a weakness, but a power. For the first time in years, she allowed someone close. She laughed more, slept better. The walls around her heart began to soften. But then, just as effortlessly as he entered, Julian stepped away. His life was shifting. He had to leave the city. Their connection didn't end in bitterness, just in distance, in silence, in questions. Lynn was heartbroken, not because she was abandoned, but because something had been awakened and then removed. Her old belief returned, whispering, "See, you are not meant to be fully loved." For weeks, she cried. She doubted herself. She replayed every conversation, looking for where she had failed. But one morning, while meditating, something shifted. She remembered what the Buddha taught about non-attachment, not just to people, but to ideas of permanence. And she realized Julian was never meant to stay. He was meant to awaken the part of her that could love freely again. That was the gift. That was the thread. Not all gifts come wrapped in commitment. Some arrive only long enough to remind you of your wholeness. This realization brought tears, not of grief, but of gratitude. Julian had not healed her. He had simply walked beside her for a moment, holding a mirror to her light. This is the hidden truth of human connection. The threads that bind us are not always visible, but they are always sacred. The Buddha often used the image of the net of Indra, a vast cosmic web, with a jewel at every intersection. Each jewel reflects all the others, and the whole net is held together by this radiant interbeing. In this view, every person you meet is a jewel in the net, reflecting something essential about your nature, your fears, your hopes, your karma, your awakening. Marcus, a middle-aged man going through a divorce, discovered this truth in his own way. For years, he blamed his wife for their unhappiness, her coldness, her distance, her lack of appreciation. But after the separation, something unexpected happened. He joined a Zen meditation group, not out of spiritual yearning, but because a friend invited him. There, in the quiet of the Zendo, he began to see himself more clearly. His impatience, his subtle need to be admired, his fear of vulnerability. He saw how he had demanded love without offering safety, how he had confused being right with being wise. Week after week, he sat in silence, and slowly, the blame began to dissolve. Not because his wife had been faultless, but because he saw how every relationship was a mirror. He wrote her a letter he never sent. "You were not my enemy. You were my reflection. You showed me the parts of myself I refused to face." And in doing so, she had unknowingly become his teacher. Not every teacher arrives in robes or temples. Sometimes they arrive in your marriage, or your heartbreak, or your rival, or your child. To recognize the thread is not to romanticize every encounter. It is to meet each person with awareness. What is this connection revealing? What is it asking me to see? Let us now pause for practice. Sit quietly. Allow the breath to settle. Bring to mind someone who entered your life, stirred something deep, and then left, whether gently or painfully. Notice the emotion that arises: longing, grief, confusion, perhaps even gratitude. Place a hand on your heart. Whisper silently, "You came to awaken something in me. Thank you. I release you with love." Now imagine the thread that connected you. It may shimmer, it may pulse gently, it may stretch into the unknown. Whisper again. "Even if our time was brief, you were not an accident. You were part of my becoming." Breathe. Let the thread dissolve into the silence. This is the 11th teaching. There are threads running through your life that only become visible when you slow down. Threads that connect you to others, to your past, to your karma, to your unfolding. When you see them, the question is no longer "Why did this happen?" but "What is this here to teach me?" And when you live with that awareness, even the hardest goodbyes carry a sacred meaning. The quiet art of trusting what comes and goes. By now, you have walked through many stories of heartbreak, awakening, boundaries, transformation, stories that may have echoed something inside you. You have seen that people do not enter your life by mistake. Each one arrives with a teaching, whether through love, tension, silence, or change. Some stay, some leave, some break you open, some build you gently. And you are not powerless in this dance. You get to choose what you carry. You get to choose what you learn. You get to choose how you grow. The Buddha did not promise a life free of difficulty. He promised a path of freedom through understanding. And when you see others as mirrors, messengers, and companions on that path, even your deepest wounds become gateways to compassion. Tonight, may you rest in this knowing that your life is not random, and neither are your connections. And tomorrow, if someone new crosses your path, perhaps you will look at them not with suspicion or need, but with presence, and wonder, what are we here to awaken in each other? If these teachings offer you peace, you are welcome to follow this channel for more moments of clarity, calm, and companionship on the path.